Okay, so yeah, nice to have all of you with us today. Um, yeah, so just like all of you, I'm working from home right now. So sorry to those of you who are dog people, but I do have two cats running around here, so you might see them at some point. Hopefully not, though. And since I'm at home, I can't take you guys through the gallery, which is, of course, what I would love to do. But what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to be showing you some archival photos and, of course, some photos from our galleries as well. So what we're talking about today is the Winnipeg General Strike. So maybe to start off, I'll get you guys just to raise your hand if the strike is something you've already been learning about a bit. Okay, quite a few. That's awesome. Yeah, quite a number of you have already been learning about the strike a bit. So I'm going to launch a poll here just to test your knowledge a little. So the questions that I'm asking here are, how many people do you think went on strike in Winnipeg in 1919, and how long do you think it lasted? So I'll give you guys a little bit to answer those questions. Awesome, you guys are quick poll takers. And lots of you guys have been paying attention in your history class, I can already tell. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and end that poll. And you guys should be able to see the results now. Most of you guys have been paying attention in your history class. That's awesome. If you didn't know the answers to these questions already, that's okay, because that's what we're doing here today, is we're learning about the strike. So yeah, the strike lasted about 6 weeks, from May to June in 1919, and 30,000 workers about there went on strike. So I'll take away those share results now. And what actually is a strike to start with? Well, just to put it simply, a strike is when people walk off of their jobs because they feel that they're not being treated well, maybe they want better pay, a shorter workday, things like that, safer working conditions. So there are different reasons people go on strike. But in 1919, 30,000 workers went on strike. So not just one workplace, but many, many workplaces across across Winnipeg, rather. And this caught the attention of people across the country. Now, this program is all about workers. So first, I want to start by talking about, what does it mean to be a worker? What does it mean to work? So first of all, what is it? What's it like to work today? So some of you guys, you're of varying ages. Some of you guys might be getting your first jobs in a few years. Some of you guys might have already had part-time jobs. So let's see if in the chat, let me know what is one right that workers have today. What's one right that you have when you start a job? And you can just go ahead and type it in the chat. Equal pay, awesome, yeah. Minimum wage, yeah. So yeah, safe working conditions, excellent. Breaks, I'm so glad you guys know all these things. Awesome, so when you start working, you really do want to read up on what your rights are. So you guys have lots of excellent answers here, and I'll go through just a few of those. One of them is, yes, you are entitled to a minimum wage. So here in Manitoba, that's $11.65 an hour. It's not a ton, right? But it's something. Your boss can't pay you less than that. You have the right to refuse unsafe work. That's a really important one. So if your boss asks you to do something that is unsafe, you can say no. They are not allowed to fire you or punish you. And you also have the right, I don't think anyone named this yet, to form a union. So a union means that you form a group, you join together. Yes, right to collective bargaining, someone just said that. So what that means is you join a group together with your fellow workers, and rather than each of you trying to figure out individually what your boss thinks, like how much you're going to get paid, how much vacation you're going to get, you guys all get together and you negotiate, you talk to your boss together. So that's what a union is. Now, 100 years ago, people did not have all of those rights that we're talking about today. People were often working really difficult, dangerous jobs for not a lot of pay, actually. And so what kinds of jobs were people doing? Well, there were, doctors and teachers, a lot of the same jobs we have today. But one thing you might not know about Winnipeg is kind of shown in this picture here that we can see, is that a lot of Winnipeg was warehouses, was factories. A lot of people were doing factory work. So if you're ever in downtown Winnipeg, so in the Exchange District in particular, that's my favorite part of the city, a lot of that used to be factories. And so people were working there. And a lot of people, though, yeah, not getting paid a ton, and we're looking for ways to improve their lives, right? Make that work better. Okay. So, moving on. The strike didn't come out of nowhere. So, of course, people were frustrated with working conditions and stuff, but there were actually a lot of different events going on throughout the world and throughout Winnipeg that kind of caused it to happen, that made things build up and build up and build up until the strike happened. So the first, we've got a little bit of a hint in this picture here, and I'm going to launch a poll. My question here is, what war did these soldiers just finish fighting in 1919? So the options I've got for those of you on Facebook: Korean War, Civil War, World War I, World War II are the options I've got up here. Excellent. You guys have definitely been paying attention in your history class. Your teachers have been doing a good job. You can see, yeah, almost all of you guys answered correctly here. World War I is the answer. So World War II is a little bit later. At this point, World War I has just ended. So yeah, that's the question there. World War I has just ended. And what's really important about that is that we've got all of these soldiers coming back to Winnipeg. They've just been involved in a really difficult, dangerous conflict, right? They've done something really brave, right? Entering into this fight. Some of them are coming back with injuries, with, you know, shell shock. And they're just hoping that their lives can go back to normal now, right? But that's not necessarily the case, because a lot of them, when they come back, are having trouble finding jobs. There simply aren't enough jobs to go around. And so these soldiers who are coming back are having a difficult time, you know, just surviving, feeding their families. And I'll launch another poll here. Who did Canada fight against in World War I? Now, this one might be a little trickier if you guys haven't learned about this yet, but again, it's okay if you don't get the answer right. That's what we're here to do today, is to learn. So the options I've got in my poll here are Russia, Germany and Japan, the Austro-Hungarian Empire and Germany, or Germany and Italy. Awesome. I'll give you guys just a couple more seconds. Okay, perfect. So again, I can tell you your history teachers are doing a good job, because most of you guys got that one right. The answer is the Austro-Hungarian Empire and Germany. Now, if you haven't heard of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, it's very likely because it doesn't exist anymore. But this was a country kind of in the middle of Europe and in parts of Eastern Europe. And yeah, like I said, it doesn't exist anymore, but part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire was a country called Ukraine, which you guys probably have heard of. And you might know that we have a lot of Ukrainian immigrants here in Canada. Now, people coming from that country and other areas of the world that Canada was fighting against were treated really poorly during and after the war. They were treated quite badly. They were called names like enemy alien, right? Which is really kind of a not nice way of saying, hey, you don't belong here. And some were even made to live in internment camps, kind of like prisons throughout the war. So that becomes important because, you know, it increases these tensions, these conflicts between people in Winnipeg. People aren't feeling equal, right? And they're feeling upset with each other. Another big event that had just happened all the way across the world in Russia, there had been a big revolution. So a revolution means a huge change. In this case, a group of people calling themselves Bolsheviks, they were saying that that they were fighting for workers' rights, and they ended up using force to take over the government. So they got rid of Russia's version of the king, and they took over all the businesses and really changed things a lot. By the way, I can see some of you guys raising your hands occasionally. If you have a question, you can always put it in the chat. Anyway, so yes, so this big change happened in Russia, and the reason this is important here in Winnipeg is because people got really worried that the same thing could happen here. So when workers in Winnipeg started talking about workers' rights, people started saying, hey, that sounds an awful lot like what those Bolsheviks were talking about in Russia. Now, really, people here weren't looking for the same thing, the same kind of huge overthrowing, but a lot of people were worried about that. Now, back to Winnipeg. The kind of big thing that was happening here was a lot of new people were moving to Winnipeg from places like Eastern Europe and different countries all around the world. And they were coming here, right, to try and make their lives better. But they were finding that Winnipeg wasn't really ready for all of them yet. A lot of them were moving into the north end of Winnipeg, which didn't have a ton of good homes built. It didn't really have sewer systems yet. You can even see, if we look in this image here, the streets aren't even paved, right? So for instance, you know, we can look at these kids, their clothes look kind of shabby. This house doesn't look all that nice. So a lot of people, even if they did have jobs, which could be hard to find, a lot of people still were having a really difficult time. Now, of course, that's frustrating no matter what, but it's even more frustrating when people are living like this. So this is an image from our gallery inside the museum. This is the home of the fictional Dr. and Mrs. Garvin. And you can see they're living very comfortably. They've got a maid here. They've got a maid here to take care of things for them. And they've got all this nice furniture. So a lot of people over in the south end of Winnipeg were making a ton of money. And so that made it extra frustrating. If you were having trouble just feeding your family, to see that other people have fancy cars and all this fancy stuff, and you know, you're struggling just to get by. So that was one thing. And what really started to reveal that was something that had happened 1 year before the strike in 1918. And this is pretty relatable to what we're going through today. This was the Spanish flu epidemic. So if we take a look here at this, this is an old, basically almost like an ad here, but it's trying to tell you how to fight the flu, right? So we can see that some of this is similar to stuff that we're doing today. And this was a pandemic that affected the whole world, just like the one we're going through now. So we can see that churches and schools and theaters were closed, just like now. Meetings were prohibited. They're trying to stop overcrowding. And so they were trying to deal with it in similar ways. But what I really want to show you guys is down here in the bit where it's talking about a cure. Now, today, if you guys, you know, goodness forbid, get sick, you will be able to go to a doctor. You won't have to pay for it because we have universal medicine now. And, you know, there'll be medicines that actually work that will help you get better. But back then, they didn't really have all of those good, effective medicines. And so instead, the ways to get better were pretty simple. So go home, go to bed, drink water, obviously clean water, right? Sleep in a nice warm room, keep away from work. Now, as you can imagine, those treatments were a lot easier if you were, you know, a rich person living in a comfortable home in the south end of the city than if you were a really poor person living in, you know, you might be living in one room with 10 other people from your family. You might have to go to work, right? Because you're the only one making money. And so this really revealed that people weren't being treated equally in Winnipeg and was one of the big things causing frustrations and leading to the strike, leading to people wanting to do something to change stuff. Now, the strike begins with these guys here. So these people here are, they are metal workers and construction workers. And they had a union, but their bosses didn't want to recognize their union. So their bosses were basically ignoring that they had made this group and refusing to talk to their group. Now they wanted things like better pay, they wanted things like better hours, but the main thing that they were worried about was that their bosses wouldn't talk to this group that they had formed. Now, taking a look here in our museum gallery, we can see we've got a setup here with a few different kinds of tools. We've got a sewing machine here. We've got painting and decorating things here. This is from a streetcar. And this here is for metalworking. And you might notice that some of them have a ribbon like this. Now that is a union ribbon. Now, maybe I'll get you guys to write in the chat, why do you think that people wanted to join unions? Why do you think that was important to people? That's a bit of a trickier question. Yeah, protect their rights, power and unity. I love that answer. Security, strength in numbers. Awesome. Power, better pay, equality, so they would feel safe. These are amazing answers, guys. You're thinking really, really well, and I love it. Now, if we zoom in, let's zoom in just on this ribbon right here, so they can have a voice, stand up for each other. Those are all absolutely right. And we're gonna zoom in on that ribbon here, and it gives us some hints about some of those reasons. So we can see here at the top, it says, in union, there is strength. And this is exactly what a lot of you guys are talking about, that if you have a concern and you go on your own to the boss, 100 years ago, even today, they were very likely just to say, I don't really care, go away, get on with your work. But if you get together with all of the people who you work with and you go with that worry to your boss, they're much, much more likely to listen to you. People are always stronger together, right, as a group. And so that was the big reason. And we can see here, this is another kind of interesting hint. This is an American flag, and next to it is the old Canadian flag. So again, they were having strength not even just as one workplace, but sometimes as workplaces or as types of workers from even different countries joining together to fight together. And that also gave them a sense of belonging, right? That they belonged to a group, to feel proud. And they would wear these ribbons proudly at things like union meetings and events like maybe a Labor Day parade, right? Okay, and I'm gonna go ahead now and I'm gonna flip this ribbon over so you'll see actually the back of it. Okay, now this is the back of that ribbon. Now taking a look at this, what kind of event do you think you might wear this side of the ribbon to? You can let me know in the chat. Oh, someone's written solidarity forever in the chat. I really like that. Excellent. Yeah, you guys are getting it right away. You would likely wear this side to a funeral. Okay. So yeah, and you might have gotten that hint because it's all black. Yeah, recognizing workers killed or injured on the jobs. That's also a really good answer. So yeah, we can see here it says in memoriam, right? And so it's all in black. And so if you were at a funeral, say one of your coworkers, yeah, if they died, you might go to their funeral and you would wear this ribbon and show your support. And not only, support saying, hey, I'm here for your family, but sometimes even financial support, right? Money. The union could help people when they were in hard times. Oh, someone asked what the letters mean. ASMWIA. That just stands for Amalgamated Sheet Metal Workers International Alliance. It's a really long name, but basically means it's a group of metal workers. Okay, we're gonna carry on here. Now, May 15th is the beginning of not just those metal workers striking, but of the whole big strike. And so a lot of people decide, you know what? Those metal workers have a point. We're going to go ahead and we are going to join them. And the women that you see here, these are telephone operators. They call themselves the Hello Girls because they would, back then, in order to talk to someone on the phone, you'd have to talk to a telephone operator. So you'd pick up the phone and there would be a person on the other end of the line, one of these women, they would connect you with your friend who you wanted to talk to. They were the first people to go on strike the morning of the Winnipeg General Strike. And so at about 7:30 in the morning, they walked off of their jobs and you couldn't make a telephone call after that, right? Once they had left, things changed right away in a really obvious way. And by the end of the day, 30,000 more workers had joined them. So you can imagine that that very quickly had a big effect on the city. Now, this woman here is one of my favorite people from the Winnipeg General Strike. Oh, someone asked, have you mentioned what the population of Winnipeg at the time was? I did not mention it. It was about just short of 200,000. So of course, not all of those people would have been working. That includes children and, you know, older folks and housewives and such. So 30,000 was actually a pretty big percentage of the number of workers in the city. Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to carry on here. Oh, someone asked, how were strikers organizing if they couldn't make phone calls? Good question. So one of the ways they were organizing was actually just public meetings. So they were going out to parks and such, and word of mouth as well. Okay, so this woman here is Helen Armstrong, and she decided partway through the strike that she needed to do something to help out her fellow workers. Now, she had been a labor leader for a long time, so that means she was helping people if they wanted to go on strike. She would kind of help them organize themselves. And she talked to the owners of the Strathcona Hotel, so we can see the name Strathcona here. The Strathcona Hotel was actually 100 years ago, right where Winnipeg is today, or sorry, right where the Manitoba Museum is today. And so she talked to the owners of that hotel and ended up making a cafe inside of it, a free cafe for strikers. Now, she meant it especially for women. And the reason for that is because women at this time, they didn't have a right to equal pay. They were often being paid less than men. And so for everyone, the strike was hard, right? If you were going on strike for 6 weeks, that means you're not getting paid for 6 weeks. But if you were a woman and had been paid less to begin with, that meant you probably didn't have a lot of money saved up either. So she made this cafe where women could come and get, you know, soup, sandwiches, men could come too, but they kind of had to show that they needed it. And this cafe served over 1,000 meals every single day. So I sent out a little video. Part of it, I talk about this. Hopefully you guys, some of you had a chance to watch that. The name of the cafe, simply it was called the Labor Cafe, but it was the Strathcona Restaurant was the actual like official name of the place. Her name was Helen Armstrong. Oh, someone asked, was a woman ever the boss of a company? Definitely sometimes, not too often back 100 years ago, but there were a lot of women workers. So women were about 1/4 of all the people working in Canada and in Winnipeg. Perfect. Okay, now, some of you guys did have a chance. Oh, here we go. Now, this picture here is from May 25th, so this is about 10 days into the strike. And maybe type in the chat, is there anything that you notice about this image? What kind of strikes you about it? Yeah, take a second to look. Yeah, not very many. Not very many cars. Oh, someone noticed that Eaton's is there. Yes, you are correct. We can see Eaton's over here. Yeah, there's not very many people on the streets, especially, remember, there were 200,000 people in Winnipeg at this point. That's actually quite a few. It was a busy, bustling, growing city, but there's almost no one there. Now, going out on the streets then, it actually would have been pretty similar to going out on the streets right now, right? People are being asked to stay home. So if you go out, you might see a few people, you know, walking, you know, going on a walk, maybe getting groceries, whatever. But you're not likely to see too many people. And it was kind of like that because the strike leaders were saying, look, we don't want anyone getting in fights. We don't want anything bad to happen. Just stay home and people will notice how important us workers are if we just don't do our jobs. That's all we're doing. And so the streets were empty, right? Things were shut down. But you might have noticed, if you had a chance to watch that video of me, that next to me is this sign. And it says, this sign says, permitted by authority of the strike committee. So I'm just going to zoom in on that here. So permitted by authority of the strike committee. And this was given to places that were deemed essential. So kind of like today, right? So I'm going to put out a poll here. Which of these places do you think were still allowed to function, still stayed open during the strike? So basically what was happening was that the strikers, right, they realized pretty quickly that, hey, not everything can be closed. There are things that people need. Yeah, and so some of the options that I have here for those of you who are, well, I'll click through so you guys on Facebook can see the question. Yeah, which places do you think stayed open? The options I have are pharmacies, movie theaters, milk delivery, or all of the above. Okay. Yeah, getting kind of some mixed responses here. But yeah, I'll go ahead and end the poll here now and I'll show you guys the results. So I'll kind of go through them, but one by one. So first of all, were pharmacies open? Yes, they were. Same as today, the strike leaders, right? The strike committee, as they're called here. The strike leaders realized pretty quickly that, hey, there are certain things people need, so they can't be closed. One of those is medicine when they're sick. So yes, pharmacies stayed open. Movie theaters, believe it or not, yes. The reason for that, well, think about it. Right now, you guys have been home for a while. You're probably starting to feel pretty antsy, right? Like you just wish that you could go out and do something. This is how people were starting to feel a couple weeks into the strike as well. And so the strike leaders decided, you know what, if we don't want people going out and getting in fights, we need to give them something to do. And so movie theaters were actually opened for that reason. Milk delivery, yes, was available. Again, this was another thing where they kind of realized after the very beginning of the strike that, you know what, we just need to keep that going. Partly that also got the strike some really bad publicity. Newspapers that were against the strike were saying things like, look at these strikers, they're monsters, they're keeping babies from getting milk. And so, yeah, all of those were kept open. But some people actually got upset about these signs. They were given to businesses basically to say, yes, we support the strike, but we're staying open because, you know, you guys need us. But some people got upset about these, and mainly because of this word here, authority. So what some people were saying was, authority? Who gave this strike committee authority to decide what's open and what's closed, right? We live in a democracy where we have a mayor who maybe I voted for. I don't remember voting for any strike committee, right? So some people actually got pretty upset about these signs. But of course, the strike leaders, from their point of view, were just trying to make sure that everyone kind of got the things that they needed. Okay, moving on. So this is a protest, and this is on the steps of City Hall. The building was a little bit different back then. And take a look at these signs and tell me what you think. I'm going to launch a poll here. Do you think this demonstration is for or against the strike? Oh yeah, someone said they had the opportunity to visit the museum lately and they noticed there was a sign in the theater. That's right, yeah, because the theater would have been open, which is kind of interesting. Yeah, so this one is, some of these signs can be a little tricky to understand when you're not living at that time, right? Because there's some things they're referring to that are a little bit confusing. But I think most of you guys have got it here that this is a protest actually against the strike. So of course there were lots of protests in favor of it, but there were some against it as well. And so we see a few different kind of interesting signs here. So this one here says, "Down with Bolshevism." So these are those guys in Russia that I talked about at the very beginning. And what some people were saying was, hey, this sounds a lot like those Bolsheviks over in Russia who, you know, kind of messed everything up over there. This one says, "Deport the undesirable alien." So again, alien is a really not nice way of saying someone who's from another place who doesn't belong here in their point of view. And so what some people were saying was that, hey, these strikers, what they really are is just immigrants coming from Eastern Europe and bringing their bad ideas with them. Now, that was kind of like fake news of the day, because really most strikers, and especially the strike leaders, were born either in Canada or in Britain. But that was a way that people who were against the strike were using to kind of fight back against it. Now, June 9th, there's a pretty big event that happens. You can see at the top here, Winnipeg police force dismissed, result of attitude toward strike. And They are fired. So what happened here was that the Winnipeg police had decided that they were going to actually support the strike. So they weren't going to walk off their jobs themselves because police, again, were a thing that was essential, but they were going to be in favor of the strike. And of course, the strike leaders thought that was awesome, but the mayor and the city definitely didn't. And so they went ahead and they asked the police to sign an oath, like a promise, right? Saying that they would not join the strike at any point or any other strike or form their own union. Now, most of the police said no, and they were fired. Almost the entire police force overnight was fired and replaced with almost 2,000 new police called the special police, who were hired especially to help get rid of the strike. Now we see this top newspaper headline here kind of makes it sound like, well, you know, it was kind of the police's fault. They were sympathetic towards the strike. It was, you know, their attitude to it. And then we've got this other headline here from the Western Labor News that says police replaced by thugs. So a thug is someone who's like violent and a bully, right? Someone who's not doing the right thing. So maybe raise your hand if you think that bottom headline is written by people in favor of the strike. Yes, yes it is. Definitely. Yeah, so you guys can see that probably by the fact that it says Winnipeg Labor News, and the other one is probably kind of against the strike. Now, this is a really important thing for you guys to keep in mind, whether you're looking at history or whether you're looking at events today, that how people see things is always going to depend on their point of view. So you might have an awesome firsthand account of something that happened, and that's great, but the way that person describes that thing is going to depend on who they are and their background and their opinions, right? And so we see that throughout the strike in all of these different newspaper headlines and things. All right, now what we're going to do now, speaking of points of view, we're going to listen to a conversation between two people here. So on the left, this guy here is Martin, and you're going to hear him right away. He's going to be playing an instrument. And he is from Ukraine, so he's going to say he's from a place called Galicia, which is in Ukraine today. And the guy on the right here, his name is Frederick. He's going to be the first voice that you hear. And he is from Britain originally, but moved here when he was young. So we're going to see if we can hear what they both have to say about the strike. Okay, and maybe just put your hand up if you can hear it, so I know that you can all hear it. Okay, awesome.
Stop with the music, bud.
So that's Frederick.
Just trying to lift my spirits.
And that's Martin.
Tough times, you know, with the strike.
Don't I know it? I'm joining the special police tomorrow. This strike has got to end.
Well then, I will see you on the streets. I'm striking.
What? I didn't win a Victoria Cross during the Great War just to come back here to no job and to see enemy aliens from Eastern Europe striking in the streets.
Hey, I'm no enemy alien. I tried to volunteer for the war, twice. And by the way, most of the strikers are English.
But you weren't born here.
No, I was born in Galicia, but I've been here since I was 10. And this is my country too. I wanted to fight for Canada and the Union Jack.
People like you would have enlisted and then turned on us on the battlefield. You would have supported the enemy, your fatherland.
I wanted to help Canada, but they called us aliens and made us carry identification papers. No one would hire us. We weren't even allowed to go to America to look for work. A bunch of us did anyway.
What are you doing here then?
Well, police stopped us at the border and forced us to march to the internment camp in Brandon. I escaped from that place twice.
That just means you got caught twice.
Yeah. All I wanted was a job. I wanted the job for the same reasons you want work. To buy food and a better place to live. What girl is going to go with the fellow who doesn't have a job?
Yeah, that's true. Anyway, I won't be stuck here much longer. I'm a returned soldier. The papers say soldiers will get work easily.
Maybe they tell you that so you won't join the strike. Most veterans support the strike.
Sorry.
I gave everything for this country. Employers won't forget that. Well, I guess I'll see you on the streets tomorrow. Watch out for yourself.
I'll watch out for both of us.
Okay, so hopefully you guys could tell mostly who was speaking there. The guy with the Ukrainian accent is Martin, the guy on the left, and the other guy was Frederick. So what I'll get you guys to do is, in the chat, I'll get you to answer these 3 questions, just briefly. One thing that you can tell me about Martin, that was the guy on the left. One thing you can tell me about Frederick, the guy on the right, and what do they have in common? So there's one thing that they share at least. And that's a bit of a long question, so I'll give you guys a second to answer that. Someone wrote Frederick is a jerk. I mean, you know, fair enough. Perfect. So you guys are saying Martin wants to join the strike. You're absolutely right. Yeah, he likes music. Yeah, Martin was placed in an internment camp. Awesome. Yeah, Frederick. Yeah, they're both. So Frederick, yeah, he was a returned soldier, right? So Martin, he spent the war in an internment camp. Frederick spent it overseas fighting in the war. Martin wants to join the strike. Frederick is thinking of joining the special police. And what they both have in common, I think most of you guys got it here. I mean, there's a few different things, right? They're both single men living in a rooming house, someone said. But mostly, yeah, they both want work. Now, some of you guys are saying here that, you know, Frederick doesn't seem very nice, and that's fair enough, but we do have to think about, you know, both of these guys, they don't have jobs. They're looking for a way to improve their lives. It's not necessarily that one of them is a good guy and one of them is a bad guy, right? But they have different points of view. They're both looking for ways to make things better for themselves. Martin says, hey, I, you know, hope that if I join this strike, if I join these protests and support it, that'll make things better for everyone, including me. Frederick, he's living in this not very nice rooming house, and he thinks, well, if I take this special police job, things will get better for me right away because I'll have a job. And so they've got different points of view, but they're both kind of looking for the same thing, right? Which is a better life for themselves. Perfect. And we'll send out a script of that later in case you couldn't quite catch what everyone was saying. Now, pretty quickly after that happens, this is the next day after those police were fired, a big event happens. After guys like Frederick get their batons, right, as police, a conflict happens. Things turn violent. And that's not too surprising, right, when you hire all of these police and you don't really train them very well. But in this picture, we can see on the left, these are the special police coming in, and on the right, we can see all of these workers coming in, and they're about to kind of meet in the middle of this photo and start fighting each other. And things, you know, sort of keep going after that. They calm down. But that's important to know that they were kind of, you know, starting to get in more of these conflicts. June 17th, a week later. Now the strike at this point has been going on for about a month, right? And these people here are the strike committee. So these are the strike leaders. And on June 17th, they are arrested. Most of them are arrested for something called seditious conspiracy. Now that's really confusing. Seditious conspiracy, what they meant by that was that they were accusing them of trying to plot against the government. So they were kind of like trying to overthrow the government, right? And that's not really what was happening here. Yes, they were asking for big changes, right, in terms of how workers were treated, but they weren't really looking to kind of change the whole system in that way or overthrow the government or anything. Stop with long words. Well, this one's not my fault. That is what they were arrested for. But yeah, I will explain. So yeah, seditious conspiracy. It is very long, I'm sorry. It does just mean that they were trying to say that the strike leaders were trying to get rid of the government. So who was the government? So I guess it kind of depends on who they thought was trying to do it. But you know, there's the prime minister, right, and the premier for the province and the mayor. So they thought that they were trying to get rid of those guys. Okay. June 21st. This is another big day. This is kind of the biggest event of the strike that you guys might have heard of before. So because all of those strike leaders were arrested, the strikers decided that they were going to have a protest. It was going to be a silent protest where they would walk silently just to protest that these leaders had been arrested. And the mayor, though, he had said, hey, no more protests, no more out on the streets walking with signs. And so what he ended up doing, the mayor, was he called in the Royal Northwest Mounted Police. So that's these guys here on horses. And they came in with batons and they came in with guns as well. So we can see in this image here, this is from our museum gallery again, we can see at the bottom here, these are some of the weapons that police were using, along with these batons up here. And strikers in some cases were fighting back as well. And that's part of what caused the violence, right, is that they were both fighting back and forth. But they were doing things like throwing bricks and bottles at the police. So eventually, those mounted police ended up cornering some people in an alleyway. And yeah, someone asked, did anyone die? Yes, actually. So several people were injured. They ended up shooting into the crowd. Several people were injured and 2 people did end up dying. So this day ends up becoming known as Bloody Saturday. Yeah, someone mentioned that this is a thick gun. Yes, this one down at the bottom here is a huge, impressive machine gun, and actually that's a really good thing to notice, because at the end of that day, the army came into Winnipeg, and they brought with them their armored cars, and they brought with them their big machine guns like that. And that really frightened people, right? They were worried that, hey, 2 people have already died. We don't want any more bloodshed. And so at this point, the strike is basically called off. And the strikers, to be honest, didn't really get what they wanted, right? They didn't get all the things they were asking for. Their strike leaders were in prison, but what this did do was it called attention to a lot of those workers' issues. Oh, what is that gun called? It's called a Lewis machine gun, L-E-W-I-S. And so what it did do is it called attention to a lot of those issues, and slowly but surely things did start to get better for workers. A lot of those strike leaders who had been arrested, they actually ended up, you know, going into politics and deciding to slowly make things better that way, you know, through becoming mayors or becoming members of parliament, right? Going all the way to Ottawa to start trying to change things there. And I really like to end on this slide because this is actually in September. So this is, of course, after the strike ended. It's already been gone for a few months already. But you can see that people still care about what's happening. And they're protesting because those leaders were still in prison at this point. And they're saying prison bars cannot confine ideas. And that's a really important idea in my mind, right? That yes, you can arrest a person, but that's not the way to fight against an idea. An idea will keep spreading even if a person is in prison. Oh yes, and there's the Hudson's Bay shop right behind them. Now I'm gonna end with a final poll question here. Question is, would you have gone on strike if you had lived 100 years ago? And there's no right or wrong answer here. I'm just curious what you guys think. And of course, there are risks either way, right? Some people during the strike did get hurt. On the other hand, if you don't do it, maybe nothing changes. But then, you know, maybe nothing changes anyway. It's really hard to know. Awesome, so I'll give you guys a few more seconds to answer. Perfect. Oh, interesting. Someone answered that they just went on strike as a teacher in Ontario. That's, yeah, 101 years later, people still go on strike sometimes. Some of you guys, yeah, in your lifetime may go on strike. You may know people who go on strike. Maybe your parents will at some point. It's still a thing that people use to get changes. And I can see that most of you decided that you would go on strike. We're heavily in favor of the strike group here. Awesome. And of course, unions still exist today as well. So most of your teachers are probably in unions. I'm in a union too. So a lot of these things that we talked about today do still impact us now. Now I'll get you guys, that's about all of the facts that I have to tell you today, but if you want to write any questions that you have in the chat, please go ahead and I'll answer them. Yeah, it's a hard question to answer because you would have been so someone says it's hard to answer this question because they're wondering, you know, they might have been a general laborer or they might have been from a richer family. Absolutely. So when we think about the past, it's important to take those different perspectives and think, hey, if I had been born as someone else, maybe I'd think totally differently about this. Definitely. Who was the mayor during the strike? He was a guy by the name of Mayor Gray. Yes, a streetcar was turned over and burned. So the strikers at one point were protesting. The streetcars were supposed to be shut down, so the streetcar workers were on strike. But the city sent a streetcar through, which made them really annoyed. So they ended up pushing it over, and they didn't manage to push it over all the way, so it was actually set on fire. So that was, yeah, another big event in the strike. I didn't have a photo here. Did the rich help the poor? In some cases, yes. So for instance, we saw Helen Armstrong's Labor Cafe. Well, that actually required, right, that some people who had enough money were donating things like soup and bread and stuff to help feed people. So in some cases, yes. Did other cities have sympathy strikes? Yes, they did. I don't know a ton about that. Mostly I know about Manitoba stuff because I work at the Manitoba Museum. But yes, there were sympathy strikes in other cities as well. Can you talk about why the strikers attempted to turn over the streetcar? Well, basically, it was just that they were upset because they were trying to shut all these things down, and the city was saying, sort of not listening to that, right? They were making those things work again, and they were saying, no, we're shutting that down. Those streetcar workers are on strike. And so it sort of ruins the strike if you're hiring new people in to do those jobs. Where was the City Hall? Is it still standing today? I love this question, actually. The City Hall was actually in the same place where it is today, but it was a different one. In the 1960s, it was knocked down. It was kind of falling apart by that point, even though it was quite a pretty building. But there are a couple of bits of it left. Some of the stained glass from that old City Hall are actually at the museum in our new Winnipeg gallery. And the clock tower, if you guys ever go to Portage Place Mall, the big clock tower in the kind of middle of the mall is actually the one from that City Hall, which is kind of cool. What happened to the police force and the special police force after the strike? Not all of the special police were kept on. Some of the original police, I believe, were hired back, but definitely not all. Was Winnipeg much smaller than it is now? It was smaller, yes, but it was growing pretty quickly at this time. So in 1900, there were about 50,000 people in Winnipeg, so 50,000. And by 1920, there were 200,000. So it was smaller, yes. So today, I can't remember how many people are in Winnipeg, about 500,000, something like that. But it was smaller, but it was growing much, much faster than it is today. Is it over? Yes, if you want to leave now and you don't have any questions, you definitely can. Did the strikers kill any police? No, no police were killed. Frederick, though, the guy in our, the mannequin that we saw earlier, he's based on a real guy, really named Frederick, who was a special police officer and a returned soldier, who was not killed, but he was pulled off of his horse and beat up. So definitely there was violence back and forth. Did the people who came from other countries' lives get better after the strike? Hard to say. People still kept facing discrimination, and in some cases it even got worse because those people were being blamed for the strike. Do I think Batman would have helped? Probably. I think Batman would help most situations. Did Winnipeg expand from the past to now? Was it smaller? Yes, it was smaller back then. Yeah, so I didn't mention the Citizens Committee of 1,000. So the Citizens Committee of 1,000 was basically a group that people against the strike made. So these were the wealthiest businessmen who were part of Winnipeg. Now, the name is kind of funny because as far as we know, there were really only about 40 guys who were a part of it. But it didn't really matter because they were the richest, most powerful businessmen in Winnipeg. And they were doing things like putting out newspapers, like talking to the mayor to trying to get him to bring the police in, stuff like that. Okay. Yeah, there's lots to talk about here. I don't know if I'll be able to get to quite all of the questions here. Were some of the rich against some of the poor? Definitely. How much money do the rich make a day? I really don't have a great answer to that. I can tell you that Winnipeg did have more millionaires compared to how many people it had in total. So we call that per capita. But it had more millionaires actually in that way than any other city in Canada. So there were people who made millions of dollars. Did people from other countries get sent back to their countries after the strike? Very good question. There were, yes, a couple of people who did get deported, who got sent back to their countries. Not too many though, but a few. Do you know if the movie Stand will be shown again in Winnipeg sometime soon? I don't, but if you see it, you can look out for my face. I'm in one of the crowd scenes for about half a second. And yeah, let's see if I can do, okay, I think that's about all of the questions. If I didn't, oh, okay, I'll do one more question here. Was there a minimum wage? So the answer is there was, just very shortly before this, brought in a minimum wage for women because women were paid so little. A minimum wage for everyone wouldn't come in for quite a while longer after this. Okay, and that's about all I have to tell you guys about today. Thank you so much. I guess Anya will come and kind of sum up here.
Yeah, so I'd love to see a show of hands. Who thinks that Alex did an awesome job? And actually, can you introduce your special guest there?
Oh, this is, hang on. This is Tea Cake.
Yeah, awesome. Hi, Tea Cake. So thank you so much. It looks like lots of big show of hands of people saying that you did awesome job. I certainly agree.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. This is our first time we've ever done anything like this, and it seems to have worked, so we're super excited. So what I'll be doing is after the session, if you were part of the webinar, I will be sending you a link with a recording of this. So if you are a teacher and you want to show this to your students, you could use that link. We do also have the opportunity to do this as a group session for classes. So just email us at the museum if you want to inquire about that. And check out our website where you can find much more of our Manitoba Museum at Home content, including other amazing videos about porcupines and all sorts of things. And this recording will eventually, for this session today, will end up on our YouTube channel. On our YouTube channel, you will also find some other videos related to the strike, including the video that Alex was mentioning of her doing a little bit of a tour in our actual exhibit. We'll also be sending you a little survey. As I said, this is the first time we've ever done this, so we would love to get your feedback on what you thought of today. So we've been bringing this to you for free today. Of course, the museum does depend usually on admissions for revenue. So if you enjoyed what you saw today and want to donate, you can just do that on any page of our website. Just go to our main page and look at the bottom to donate if you are willing and able to support the museum. So thank you so much for attending. I'm going to sign off now. And again, check out our website. We're going to be doing more of these. We'd love to hear from you. And stay home, stay safe, and thanks for joining us.